What would you say if a cop leaned into your window tonight and asked, "How much have you had?" If you answer that question, you may hand over the exact words they need for a DUI case. That one casual question is often the bridge between a simple stop and your arrest. Hit subscribe right now because what I'm about to show you could save your license, your money, and your future. And tap like so you can find this again when you actually need it on the side of the road. Here's what you're about to learn: why that question is almost never innocent, the exact sentence you should use instead, how to stop yourself from talking too much when you're nervous, and how to end the fishing trip without being rude. Most people have no idea how fast a normal stop can turn into a full DUI investigation. I've analyzed over 200 body cam videos, and the pattern is always the same. The officer asks a simple question. The driver tries to sound honest. Then that honest answer gets twisted into evidence. You need to know how this works before you ever see blue lights in your mirror. If you only remember one thing from this video, remember this: your biggest mistake usually happens before the officer ever asks you to step out. Now let's talk about why this matters so much for you. When an officer asks, "How much have you had?" they are not just asking for a number. They are testing your speech, your memory, your timing, and your nerves. They want to hear whether you say one drink, two drinks, a couple beers, or nothing at all. Then they compare your words to your smell, your eyes, your movements, and the time of night. Here's the trick they don't want you knowing. They do not need your answer to help you. They need your answer to help them build the story. If you say just two beers, they hear an admission. If you say none, but they smell alcohol, they hear a lie. If you ramble, they hear nerves. Your words can do damage even when you think you sound calm. So your first tactic is simple. Do not answer the drinking question at all. Let me show you exactly what you say the first time they ask. You look at the officer and say this: "Officer, I choose not to answer questions." Word for word, memorize that line. That line works because it does three huge things for you. First, it gives them no number to write down. No two beers, no just one glass of wine, no I had something hours ago. Second, it keeps you from guessing. A lot of drivers are nervous and say the wrong thing, then try to fix it, and now they look dishonest. Third, it keeps the stop from turning into a conversation contest you can't win. The officer does this all the time, you do not. Bad way, most drivers say, "I only had two beers." Then the officer writes down your own admission and keeps digging. Good way, smart drivers say, "Officer, I choose not to answer questions." Then the officer loses the easiest piece of evidence. Here's why that matters. In a DUI stop, the officer is trying to stack small pieces together: smell of alcohol, red eyes, late hour, slight sway, admission to drinking, nervous hands, maybe a little stumble. Any one thing may look weak by itself. But when you give them your own words, you help them glue the whole picture together. That is why you never want to hand them the glue. And no, this does not mean you should argue. You are not fighting. You are not challenging them. You are not being rude. You are simply refusing to help build a criminal case against yourself. This is 100% legal. You still give your license, registration, and insurance if your state requires it. You still keep your hands visible. You still follow lawful orders. You just stop talking about where you were, what you drank, when you drank, and how you feel. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings. In Berkmer versus McCarty, the court said normal traffic stop questioning usually happens before Miranda warnings are required. In plain English, that means the officer does not have to read you your rights before asking roadside questions. So if you're waiting for some movie moment where they say, "You have the right to remain silent," you may already be too late. Your roadside answers can still be used. That's why your silence matters from the first minute, not after the cuffs go on. Watch what happens when a driver thinks being extra honest will save them. They say, "I had two beers with dinner, but I'm fine." Now, the officer has an admission and a challenge. If the officer thinks you're not fine, they will test that statement. But if you calmly say, "Officer, I choose not to answer questions," there is no number, no timeline, and no easy quote for the report. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection. Your job is not to explain. Your job is to avoid giving away evidence for free. Have you ever been asked this during a stop, or do you think you'd answer out of nerves? Drop a comment below because I want to know if you think you could actually use that line under pressure. Now, the second tactic is the broken record method. You do not invent new answers when the officer keeps pushing. You repeat the same calm line. Here's exactly what you say when they try a different version of the same question. "Officer, I want to comply with lawful orders, but I do not answer investigative questions." Those exact words. Keep them simple. Here's the reality. Officers often ask the same thing three different ways because they know nervous drivers change their wording. First, it's, "How much have you had?" Then it becomes, "So you were drinking tonight?" Then, "When was your last drink?" Then, "Where were you coming from?" Then, "You sure it was only two?" They are not changing topics, they are fishing for cracks. Your job is to give them no cracks at all. Bad way. Most drivers say, I had a drink earlier, but that was it. Then they get pulled into 5 more questions and start changing details. Good way. Smart drivers say, Officer, I want to comply with lawful orders, but I do not answer investigative questions. Then the officer hears the same calm answer every time. That broken record line is powerful because it shows 2 things at once. You are cooperating with lawful commands and you are not volunteering evidence. That matters because silence by itself can sound cold if you do it badly. But when you say you will comply with lawful orders, you sound steady, not hostile. You make it clear that you are not resisting. You are drawing a line between physical compliance and verbal self-incrimination. This is where a lot of drivers mess up. They think if they just explain enough, the officer will relax. So they start filling silence with extra details. I'm coming from my cousin's birthday. I ate a lot. I'm tired. That's why my eyes look like this. I'm talking weird because I'm nervous. Every extra sentence is one more chance to sound confused, defensive, or inconsistent. Defense attorneys use this exact line in court because they know loose talking is what hurts you most. Here's the reality. The officer may act annoyed when you use this tactic. That does not mean it failed. It usually means you just cut off their easiest path. Remember, your goal is not to make the officer happy. Your goal is to get through the stop without building the case for them. If the officer orders you out of the car, you comply. That part matters. In Pennsylvania versus Mims, the Supreme Court said officers can order a driver out during a lawful traffic stop. In plain English, you do not win by refusing to step out. You win by stepping out and still keeping your mouth shut. So if you're told to exit, you can say, I will step out and comply with lawful orders, but I do not answer investigative questions. That keeps you safe and consistent. Former police officers have confirmed this works because it takes away the back and forth they rely on. They can still observe you. They can still do what the law allows, but you stop feeding the machine with your own words. That matters more than most people realize. Your third tactic is about the moment the stop starts to spread. Maybe they ask to look in your car. Maybe they say, mind if I check your trunk? Maybe they say, if you have nothing to hide, this won't take long. This is where you use a second hard line. You look at the officer and say this, Officer, I do not consent to any searches. Word for word. Keep it calm. Why does this matter in a video about drinking questions? Because once your answers stop helping them, some officers switch lanes. They look for something else. Open container, pills, weed, a gun issue, anything that makes the night bigger for you. If you casually agree to a search, you may turn one problem into 5. Bad way. Most drivers say, yeah, go ahead, I've got nothing to hide. Then the search starts, and now every item in your car becomes a new problem. Good way. Smart drivers say, Officer, I do not consent to any searches. Then they keep their rights intact and force the officer to rely on actual legal grounds. This is 100% legal. And this is where Schneckloth versus Bustamante matters. The Supreme Court said consent searches can be valid even when police never told you that you could refuse. Read that again in plain English. They do not have to warn you that you can say no. So if you wait for permission to protect yourself, you may never get it. You have to use the words yourself. Listen closely because this is critical. Refusing consent does not magically stop every search. If an officer already has legal grounds, they may search anyway. But your refusal still matters because it prevents you from volunteering away your rights. It also helps later if a judge has to review what happened. Defense attorneys use this exact line in court because clear refusal is always better than confused silence. Watch what happens when the officer says, "Why not if you've done nothing wrong?" That question is bait. It tries to make you defend your refusal. Don't take the bait. You do not explain. You do not debate. You just repeat, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Calm voice, same tone, no sarcasm, no anger. And while we're here, do not confuse questions with tests. In many places, roadside balance tests and chemical tests have different rules. Your silence about drinking is not the same thing as refusing every kind of test. Those rules can change by state. So the big lesson for you here is narrow and powerful. Never volunteer admissions. Never consent to searches. Keep those 2 lanes separate in your mind. 90% of drivers don't know what's coming next. Stay with me because this next move is what stops a long fishing trip from turning into a long night. Your 4th tactic is the exit line. When the officer has finished the traffic business, you ask one clean question. Let me show you exactly what you say. Officer, am I being detained or am I free to leave? Those exact words. This line matters because traffic stops are supposed to have a mission. Check the license, handle the reason for the stop, write the ticket or warning, then you leave. In Rodriguez versus United States, the Supreme Court said officers cannot extend a traffic stop to do extra investigating without enough new reason. In plain English, they cannot keep you there just to fish around forever. Bad way. Most drivers say, I guess I'll just wait here. Then the stop drags on while more questions and more pressure pile up. Good way. Smart drivers say, "Officer, am I being detained or am I free to leave?" Then the officer has to either let them go or make the legal basis clear. This question is not magic, and it is not a challenge. It is a checkpoint. If the officer says you are free to leave, you leave quietly. If the officer says you are detained, now the line is clear. You do not argue. You do not flee. You do not make sudden moves. You just know where you stand. If your state requires you to identify yourself during a lawful stop, you follow that rule. Hebel versus 6th Judicial District says some states can require your name during a lawful stop. So again, this is not about refusing basic identification. It is about refusing investigative chatter. Big difference. Now tie all of this together in your head. Berkemer means roadside questions can still be used even before Miranda. Mims means you may have to step out. Schneckloth means they do not have to warn you that you can refuse consent. Rodriguez means they cannot drag the stop out forever without legal reason. When you understand those 4 rules, you stop guessing and start moving with purpose. Here's the legal framework in plain English so you can actually remember it when your heart is pounding. Berkemer versus McCarty says your roadside words can still hurt you even if nobody read you your rights yet. So do not wait for a warning before protecting yourself. Pennsylvania versus Mims says if the officer tells you to step out, you step out. You do not argue over that on the roadside. Schneckloth versus Bustamante says police do not have to tell you that you can refuse a search. That is why your refusal has to be clear and spoken out loud. Rodriguez versus United States says the stop cannot be stretched out for extra fishing without enough new reason. So once the traffic job is done, your question matters. Am I being detained or am I free to leave? That is not being difficult. That is forcing the stop back into legal boundaries. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection because it keeps you from handing over the 2 things prosecutors love most: your own admissions and your own consent. Now let's walk through a real roadside scene so you can hear how this sounds in your mouth. You get pulled over at 11:40 at night. The officer says you rolled a stop sign. They walk up and ask for your license and insurance. Then they smell something they think might be alcohol. They ask, "Be honest with me, how much have you had tonight?" Here's the wrong way. You smile because you think honesty will help. You say, "Just 2 beers with dinner, and that was a while ago." The officer asks what time. You say maybe 8. Then they ask where. You say downtown. Then they ask which place. You pause. Now your pause gets noticed. Then they ask if you feel okay to drive. You say yes, but now you sound nervous. In 5 minutes, the report says you admitted drinking, gave uncertain timing, showed nervous behavior, and had an odor of alcohol. You built half the case with your own mouth. Now here's the right way. You hand over your documents. The officer asks, "How much have you had tonight?" You say, "Officer, I choose not to answer questions." They ask again another way. You say, "Officer, I want to comply with lawful orders, but I do not answer investigative questions." They ask you to step out. You step out calmly. They ask to search your car. You say, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." They finish the warning. The moment feels like it should be over, but they keep hovering. You ask, "Officer, am I being detained or am I free to leave?" Now the stop has shape. Now your rights have shape. Now the officer has to work with what they actually have, not with the extra evidence you would have donated for free. That does not guarantee you go home every time. Nothing does. But it gives you the best possible position without lying, resisting, or making things worse. Former police officers have confirmed this works because it removes the easy wins, and I've analyzed over 200 body cam videos where the entire stop changed because the driver just kept talking. Next week, I'm dropping the video on what to say when cops claim they smell weed. Subscribe right now so you don't miss it, because that exact claim is what turns thousands of simple stops into full vehicle searches. So lock these 4 moves into your memory. First, never answer, "How much have you had?" Say, "Officer, I choose not to answer questions." Second, use the broken record line when they rephrase. Third, never volunteer a search. Say, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Fourth, when the traffic business is done, ask, "Am I being detained or am I free to leave?" If you remember those lines, you stop giving away the 2 things cops want most in that moment: your words and your permission. Hit subscribe so you catch that weed smell video next week. Smash like if this script just gave you lines you can actually use under pressure, and drop a comment telling me which sentence you're going to memorize first. Stay safe out there.